Good morning or good afternoon, folks. This is the lecture summary for surveillance and your right to privacy for CRIM 204. This is basically like police presence and its perception part 2, if you will, where I'm talking about the role of surveillance in our lives right now. And it's interesting because every semester I teach this particular lecture, the surveillance gets more and more intense. And so if you look at surveillance and how limited your privacy is, you do have to keep in mind that there is a government version of this. You know, the NSA scrolling through everybody's emails and texts. Yes, that is a real thing because all of your all of your transmissions are controlled by 24 Pentagon controlled satellites. But keep in mind that you just have to keep in mind that if you talk about El Presidente and some sort of threat towards that person, that's the stuff that gets red flagged. If you start talking about bomb making, that's the stuff that gets red flagged. Please do not be an idiot that does that on purpose to see what happens. Please trust me, you don't want that. You don't want that in your life, okay? So there's the government version of this, and then there's the one that's honestly, it's way more invasive. It's the private version of this. It's the corporate version of this. It's the stuff that Google does. It's the stuff that Amazon does. It's the stuff that Facebook does. They're surveilling you and limiting your privacy so much more. They're looking at everything you do, every call you make, every text you make. They're looking at your calendars. They're looking at your pictures. They're looking at your birthdays. They're looking at everything in order to push advertising towards you. It's not some Illuminati conspiracy to take over the world and world domination. Jeff Bezos is kind of doing that a little bit, but anyway, they're there just to advertise. They're doing all that just so they can advertise to you. So your privacy really is compromised all over the place. So with that, and a discussion on criminology and criminal justice is the role of policing and the surveillance of you. Sometimes those worlds cross with each other. So for example, if anybody has at home Ring technology, I think Ring is owned by Amazon if I'm not mistaken. It's a doorbell thing where you could look at who's outside your home, and if someone rings your bell, it sends a signal to your phone while you're at work. You get to see who's standing outside your door. NYPD has access to that. It's written in the contract. So sometimes those things. So NYPD could look at your cameras too. Careful for anyone that uses Ring technology. You sign those rights away as soon as you activated those devices. Just keep that in mind. Go back, if you don't believe me, go back and look at the fine print. It's there. So with that, there's electronic surveillance. There's camera surveillance. There's the domain awareness system. I'm going to have to put up a video for that. How NYPD uses bank cameras, traffic cameras, etc. to track people. But then there's also the physical forms of that. Police cars, police cameras on the street, and then stop and frisk. So stop and frisk is not as prevalent as it used to be, but it is something that is invasive and only 10% effective. 90% of the people who were stopped and frisked several years ago weren't doing anything wrong. And NYPD kept saying so we got that 10%. What do you want? And so, I want you to consider that. We basically have 3 lectures left, including this one. I want to start addressing, finish out the quizzes for the semester. And for the final paper, it's called the crime prevention paper. That's due on May 12th. And I'm not going to hold you to the high standard that I had before, but I still want 4 sections for this paper. This is a research paper. This paper should be typed and double-spaced. It's going to be about 7 pages long. First section is I want you guys to pick a crime, a famous crime in New York, something that ended up in the newspaper headlines. In the first section, tell me about the crime. Tell me about the crime as if I've never heard of it before. Some famous crime that occurred where you can identify a criminal, where you can identify somebody that got arrested for it, etc. And that's that. Secondly, what I wanted you to do in that second section is I wanted to play with crime data. Do what you can, because what I'm asking you to do, because I wanted you guys to peruse through CompStat and the Uniform Crime Report for the FBI. If you can make references to those, great. A+ paper, fantastic. What I had done is, if you look at the directions online under assignments on Blackboard, I put a sample paper there. And that sample paper kind of represents the minimum of what I would want, okay? It doesn't even include citation throughout, like I really want, but that particular nameless student did deal with a little bit of crime data. So in the second section of the paper, I want you to deal, what I'm looking for is that in the same year that your crime was committed, I want you to see if that crime was something that was popular or out of the ordinary. Was it trending? Was it occurring at a high rate during that particular year? I kind of want you to look at 5 years prior, 5 years after, to see if there's like a trajectory of that crime being very predictable. Third section of the paper is about the police response. How did the police respond to this? Did they investigate it correctly? Did they mess up the investigation? How did they handle it? And then the fourth section, so the first three sections, all research, okay? I want citation in all three of those. Fourth section is your opinion, and it's about crime prevention. Keep in mind the difference between crime control and crime prevention. Crime control usually waits for the person to commit the crime and then they punish them thereafterwards. Crime prevention tries to prevent the crime from occurring in the first place. So in that last section, I want you to detail, in your opinion, a way that that crime could have been prevented altogether. What would have had to have gone in place? And this you can use things like surveillance, police cars, cameras, etc., but go beyond that if you can, because sometimes crime is the result of not having other options, a person that's too broke. Sometimes crime occurs because there's not like a recreation center in an area, because there's not social workers and adult role models in that neighborhood. So think a little bit bigger beyond policing in terms of what could have prevented this crime from occurring in the first place. Okay? So beyond that, I'll field any questions, and that's it. Take care, guys. I'll talk to you. Bye now.